Well, welcome. As you can see from the workbench, I'm doing final prep right now on getting the decals that I prepared ready to go onto Ross's machine. Hopefully you can see those in the shot. See if that helps. And that doesn't help. It's probably an issue with the LED lights. But you can generally see them. These are obviously the decals that go with the Tiffany pattern. It's also sometimes referred to as the gingerbread pattern. One of the prettiest decal patterns, in my opinion, that Singer ever developed. And when I reproduce them, I do them exactly to spec as they would have been on the original machines that left the factory in the early 1900s. This particular machine that they're going to go on is a 1908 Singer 27, born right around July 21st, which makes it obviously over 100 years old. And once these decal patterns get put on the machine, that machine is just going to absolutely come to life. And I'm going to be showing you, just to kind of remind you, I'm going to be showing you where this model 27 started when it arrived at the workshop from Texas. But once I go through the painstaking process, when I'm working on the cutout of these decals that I prepared, I go between a couple of different things. I use the X-Acto knives over here to do part of the cutting of them. Rough cutting, I use these scissors, and I even use a diamond cut type bit on here to do some of the edge work when I'm trying to really bring them in. When you cut out decals like this, whether you prepare them yourself like I did or whether you buy them aftermarket, you've got to get as close to the decal pattern as possible. And if there's any in sections that you can cut out as well, it's going to give the final product that much more detailed definition and clarity. When they did them at the factory, these were already pre-cut when they put them on the machines before they clear coated them. And so the work that they did at the factory, a lot of that was done in advance. I wish I had that luxury, but this all has to painstakingly be cut out, each and every one of these decals. This is obviously one of the bed decals here. Again, if you're just joining the live stream, this is the Tiffany or the gingerbread pattern, one of the prettiest decal sets that Singer ever developed, along with the red eye. Everyone loves the red eye decal pattern. But you can just see the definition, and you can imagine the extent of cutting that has to be done on this. I even picked up these, which are really, really helpful. These are actually designed as surgical scissors that they would use in an operatory, and they are as sharp as can be. So for a lot of the detailed cutting, when I'm trying to go around edges like this flower and that, I'll use those surgical scissors. The thing is, you got to be careful how you offset them. Otherwise, you can cut right through the decal before you realize what's going on. But all of these have to be cut out. And this one. And this one. So when someone contacts me about a full restore and I quote the price to do it, when you factor out all of the labor, the mechanical, in this case, it's a treadle setup, so it doesn't require any electrical per se. There's no specific light mounted on this machine, but just the mechanical, the aesthetic, the paint work, and then the decal prep and application. Um, what I charge for my full restores is quite honestly a steal. It's a steal when you consider the extent of the work that I have to do in cutting these out. You can just see, I love the gingerbread pattern, don't you? Isn't it spectacular? All these pieces have to eventually get put on the machine. And if you've never seen the gingerbread or the Tiffany decal pattern on a machine before, it is absolutely spectacular. One of the prettiest decal patterns on any machine, any make, any model in the world. Look at the intricacy of this. And again, um, in between using my X-Acto knives, I'm trying to get that lined up so you can see just how complicated it is. Preparing these alone and then using the special paper that I use to print them on in and of itself is a science marathon trying to get it just right. The tones and the coloring, and I mean, it's just a very tedious process, very, very tedious process. But when you see the final result, it's well worth it. Some more pieces of that pattern, which are just spectacular. This is going to be for the rear of the machine. And again, I've only done a rough cut on these. What I have to do now is I have to use the X-Acto knives and the surgical scissors that I showed you a little bit ago, these, which are, I mean, razor, razor, razor sharp, in order to navigate around all of the edges of these patterns that I prepared for this Model 27. You can just look at this one piece and look at the extent of cutting that has to be done on it to give you an idea. This is for the front of the machine. And this is a challenging, out of any of the other decals, once I do the fine cutting of them, now that they're printed, once I do the fine cutting of these decals, um, this is going to be one of the trickiest ones to put on, much like the red eye on the Class 66. And that's because when this lays across the pillar, extending from left to right across the arm, getting this to lay flat, you've got to do some cut-ins on the pattern, but not make those cut-ins evident in order to get this to follow the bevel and the contour of that upper part of the pillar adjacent to the arm. Very, very tricky piece to get on the machine. And again, when you're putting decals on, you've got only a limited amount of time to get them into position before the glue back that's a part of this process starts to attach itself to that finished paint surface. You don't get it moved before then. Boy, oh boy, it is a booger to try to get it to move again and get it back into position. And if you've ever seen me doing this, as I'm getting it into position, I've got a real slick surface that starts to dry very quickly. And then I bump it into position using paint brushes and other real fine tools just to very, very gently slide the decal into position. The problem you run into with these is they can very, very quickly move out of position. And then you got to try to move them back before, again, that backing starts to attach itself to the painted surface. But the Tiffany, or also this is referred to as the gingerbread pattern, was on a number of the very early Singer models, especially the Model 27s, the 127s, and the 128s as well. And if you might remember, I'm working on a 128 as well, which is a 3/4 size machine. As a matter of fact, if I think I can pivot around and show you what that looks like. This is actually a 128 right here that I've begun to do some work on, but it has to earn its way to the workbench. I hate to say that, but you can see this one has a beautiful pattern on it as well. This is not the original gingerbread pattern, but it's a lovely pattern nonetheless. And again, this is a 3/4 size machine where the 27 and the 127 are going to be full size machines within that same early 1900 class. This is going to be another one of the bed decals right here. You can kind of see that in the shot. But imagine with the detail of this decal pattern that I prepared, how much time it takes to carefully navigate around this pattern. Again, the goal is to get as tight to this decal as you can without cutting the decal, because when I prepare these, it's on a special paper that gives maximum clarity of the decal pattern. But you have to be able to separate these two halves. And if any of the edges you cut too far in, this is like ultra rice paper. It can tear so easily when I try to put it onto the machine. Very, very easily. And again, this one I'm already dreading. This is the piece that goes on the front of the Model 27 from 1908. And if I didn't tell you the history of this at all, this machine came to the workshop from Texas. And unlike typically when I'm working directly with a customer, which is my preference, I love that one-on-one with customers, especially when they're looking at preparing the machine to be an heirloom for the family. But this one, I'm kind of working for the customer's customer, or the customer's whatever it is. I've got a gentleman, his name is Ross, out of Texas. Ross owns a company called Shiner Prairie Woodworks. Shiner Prairie Woodworks out of Shiner, Texas. And the situation here is I'm working for Ross, who has a customer, and Ross is doing the work as far as the cabinet that this Model 27 from 1908 is going to be going back into. I'm doing the machine work. So I'm eventually going to get this machine done. I was supposed to have it done in October, but I got behind on other projects. And so now we're already into November. This is November 1st. And I've got all of the paint work done, but now I have to get back to the paint shop, which is 60 miles from the workshop. And once I've done all the fine cutting of all of these decals, again, I got a huge stack of decals I've got to do, from the bed decals to the adornment decals that go on the machine. I mean, decals just everywhere. And all of these have to be cut using the surgical scissors, using the X-Acto knives. I'm not a big fan of these X-Acto knives. I know other people that do restorative work will use X-Acto sets like this to do the cutout of the decals that they buy aftermarket. I prepare all my decals in shop. That's why I prefer to do it. That way I have control over the product in the end. But getting them prepped and printed on the special paper that I use is only a small part of the process. The time-consuming part is navigating around all of these fine edges without cutting the decal, and then getting these down to the paint shop without them collecting any dust or dirt or anything like that. It's almost like being in a white room. You have to get these prepped, and then finally timing it, because again, these have a water slide type effect to them with the paper that's used. Once they're cut out, they're like rice paper trying to separate them from this backing, and you only have a very limited amount of time, to get them positioned properly on that finished surface on the machine before they start to anchor in on that paint. And once they anchor in, I've had this happen before, it is just a nightmare to try to get them detached from the paint surface again, repositioned. And then what you lose then is, when I prepare these decals, they've got a glue back on them. If you don't get them right the first time and you remove them by basically flooding that area with a solution to try to get them off of the machine again, then you lose the benefit of that glue back. And if you don't really do a very gentle process of applying the clear coat after they're in position, those decals can start to move. And that is the worst case scenario, because clear coat is stickier than snot when it goes on the machine. So everything has to fall into place just perfectly. Oh, good morning, Emma. Good morning. Emma is at work right now. Talk about dedication. Thank you, Emma, for trying to jump on this live stream a little bit from work. Emma works as a pharmacist, and you can imagine how busy a pharmacy can be, but she still tries to hop on and kind of, still with an earbud or whatever, does her thing as a pharmacist. So appreciate that dedication a great deal. But again, if you're joining this live stream a little bit late, the pattern you're looking at is called the gingerbread pattern, also known as the Tiffany pattern, one of the most intricate, one of the most complex patterns that Singer ever came up with. And when I reproduce these, I reproduce them down to the spec. I mean, the minutest of spec in getting the pattern just identical to the way it would have been when it originally came out of that factory back in the early 1900s. These again are going to go on a Model 27 that is from the year 1908. So just, I feel like I've really come a long way with this project, but I've got so much further to go. And like I said, I'm running behind now, because this was supposed to be done in October. Now we're in November. But if you guys don't remember this project real well, let me take you over to some of the still shots and show you kind of where we started with this, and just give you an appreciation for, if you ever decide to take a step towards me and say, hey, I want to look at getting a full restore done on grandma's machine or mom's machine, and then I quote you the price. When you see the extent of the work that has to go into it, you're going to appreciate why it's that price. At least I think you will. I hope you will. So let me show you some of these pictures. And I'm going to do my best not to lose any of these decals. Matter of fact, I'm going to set them to the rear so that they don't fall off of the workbench here. Move the laptop over. Whoops, Sorry about that. That cord was tangled a little bit and you just took a tumble with me. Well, if you don't remember Ross's machine, how it kind of arrived at the workshop, this gives you a little glimpse of it. Rust everywhere. Look at the bed down here as far as the pitting of the bed and everything. It's just an absolute mess. And sometimes I'm able to take the finish of a machine like this, as rough as it is, and not have to take it all the way down to bare metal, which saves me probably about 2 hours of time. On this one, the rust was just embedded throughout the bed, on the edges, on the bottom, and everywhere else. So you'll see I ended up taking this machine all the way down to bare metal. But before you can do that, you've got to take off all of the hardware of the machine to get it ready for that. That's kind of what it looked at as a frontal view there, if you can kind of see that in the shot. Oh, hi, Mindy. Mindy from Las Vegas has joined us. It's always great to see Mindy. Glad you could hop on this live stream. I'm kind of showing folks where I'm at with this 1908 Model 27 that has come out of Texas. It belongs to a secondary customer, and I'm working for the woodworker that has done the restore on the cabinet that this machine is going to go back into. So he's doing the woodwork side, I'm doing the machine side, which includes all brand new paint, brand new Tiffany decals, and it's been a project. Let's just say that. And I've run into some delays with other projects, and so now I'm behind the ball because this was supposed to be done in October. Now we're into November already, so I'm getting really anxious about this. And there you can see little remnants of that Tiffany pattern right there. It's one of the most spectacular decal patterns that Singer ever developed. And when I reproduce it, I do it down to the minutest of spec in getting it identical to the way it was when it came out of the factory in the early 1900s. And this machine, again, is going to be set up as a treadle machine, so you won't see any motor in these photos. It's going to be set up as a treadle, and that makes my job a little bit easier because then I don't have to do the motor work too. But it still has been a really, really time-consuming project. See, I get a slightly different angle on this, if that makes it a little bit better. Yeah, I think you can kind of see that. It's the camera doesn't capture it as well as what I can see on the screen. And I'll probably, when I eventually get this done and I premiere it, which will be hand turning the balance wheel because it's set up as a treadle, I'll probably shoot it with my other camera just so it can capture some of that clarity a little bit clearer. But you can see the characteristic of this machine with a little access plate for maintenance right there. It's oftentimes mistaken as another machine. The 127 and the 27 are going to be full-size machines. They're sometimes mistaken for the 128, which is a three-quarter size machine. As a matter of fact, the 128 that was made in the same time period as this one in the early 1900s, it's only going to be a three-quarter size machine, and it's going to, in many ways, with the body style, it's going to look real similar to the 9999K. But the one I'm finishing here is a full-size machine, just like the 127. The 127 and the 27 are both full-size. Kind of get an idea of what I'm working with, and you can see part of it through there. Also, the entire machine just had a lot of rust buildup on it, a lot of rust. I'm not sure if that helps or not. You can even see down here in the carriage area where that vibrating shuttle is going to be operating. All of this is rusted as well. A lot of rust buildup, and you can see the paint finish. It's obvious why the customer wanted to get it done, because it's nowhere near looking like what you would consider to be an heirloom piece. There you got a little bit of a look at the bed as well. You can kind of see what we're working with. Just trying different angles to see if it comes in a little bit clearer. Even if you look over here at the serial plate, you can see that that's rusted. The bobbin winding assembly up here is rusted as well. That's all rust. The machine was just an utter mess. There you can see the front portion of it. We even have some mold on the medallion, the Singer branding mark there on the front. I don't know where this machine was stored down in Texas, but it was definitely exposed to a lot of abuse environmentally. And this is, again, if you ever are out and about and you're trying to identify a machine, this little plate access is a classic telltale sign of one of three models. Again, either a model 27 like we're looking at on screen, a 127 which followed it, or a 128. Again, the way you can tell right away whether it's a 128 or not is it will then be a 3/4 size machine like a 99 or 99K. You're kind of getting an impression of how the machine started. There's the back of the machine on the back of the pillar. Even this piece of jewelry right here, you can see is just encrusted with filth, buildup, and even a little bit of rust underneath all that filth. And as you look at the back of the pillar here, you can see just a very subtle, I should say subtle remnants of that Tiffany pattern that's remaining. These are actually two pieces of the pattern that you have to join together. And when I do this in the paint shop, I'll have to use a mechanical caliper to make sure that it's centered perfectly on the pillar and that the spacing between these two decal pieces is just spot on. It's a very tedious process. And again, it's a time process as well, as that glue back begins to set and adhere to the paint. If you don't get it right very quickly, you're going to be in a world of hurt. You can see on the back of the machine here, there's no remnant at all left of that Singer uh, decal that would extend across the back of the arm. The one that's going to go back on the machine once it's ready is going to look like this. Let me see if I can show it to you. This is the one that's going to go back onto the machine to replace what there's nothing left there, obviously, after the new paint and everything is done. And this one is a breeze to position on the arm compared to the one that has to go on the opposite side on the front. I think I showed that to you at the beginning, because that one, like the red eye decal pattern, has a curve. This curved portion right here has to go at the very top of the pillar adjacent to the arm. And because the surface is not flat, I've got to do surgical little cut-ins to the decal so that this will lay flat and follow the contour of that upper part of the upper part of the arm on the right side near the top of the pillar. This, I always dread having to do these because they're so tricky to get to lay properly on the machine. And the cuts have to be done using the surgical scissors that I showed you. These are actually used in hospitals in surgery. They're razor sharp, and I've got to do subtle little cut-ins to this rounded part all the way around, but they can't be visible. They can't be visible so that this will follow the contour of the bevel of the machine. I never look forward to these, but once you get it in place and once it lays like you want it to lay, it's a great sense of accomplishment. So once again, we're kind of just looking at this Model 27. Again, this is a Model 27 from 1908 that belongs to a customer that I will never meet. I'll never meet him because I'm doing this work for the woodworker that's doing the cabinet, and then he's going to join up the machine that I finish with the cabinet that he's finishing down in Texas, and then he'll present it as a final product, my work and his work together, to his customer. And this is kind of unusual because I love that one-on-one with the customer. I'm not going to get that in this instance. I'll never meet the final customer that's going to enjoy the fruits of my work. Kind of a bummer, but it is what it is, right? I'm trying to get the angle right on this camera. I'm just not getting it. Yeah, that light doesn't help at all. I'll show you what I can show you, but the camera isn't capturing it real well. Oh, there's one of my silly little pictures I put in there. Some of you probably saw this on Facebook. What I've started to do, because when I take pictures of the progress on a machine, it can be 150 pictures. And in order to kind of make it more interesting to folks that are looking at the pictures, I've been sliding random pictures in among the progress shots just for fun. And this is one of those here. And if you can't see it with a camera, on the bottom it says, or at the top, I should say, it says, "It was that big dog over there. He called me mean names." And it's as if the cat is telling his tale to his dog counterpart. So just a little bit, some silliness, make it more interesting. Another shot of the machine there. And I think we may have gone full circle. Let me double check here. No, I don't think so. We haven't seen it from this angle yet. Now we're kind of looking over the top of the pillar down across the arm. But if you look real close, I didn't know what you can see as far as the clarity of this live stream, but it's rusted all the way down the edge beds and everything. A lot of rust on this machine. Don't you love that balance wheel? That's actually larger because it's from the early 1900s. Again, this machine was born in 1908. We look at some of the spoked wheels and we go, wow, they're huge. This one is probably a good 12% larger than most of the other spoke wheels that I presented on other machines like the Class 66s on this channel. It's just an amazing balance wheel that they made back in the early 1900s. Kind of a rear shot again. Just you can imagine the scope of the project, and that's why when folks will contact me about a full restore, I like to talk about the price up front just so that they can appreciate, what the investment is. Again, when most families do this, that machine is going to have sentimental value. It belonged to a great grandmother, it belonged to a great aunt. In some cases, if the machine isn't, in the early 1900s, maybe it belonged to that individual's mom or another relative. Um, and that's why they want to preserve the machine. That's why they want to have it as a family heirloom. But it's a big investment because of the extent of time that a project like this requires. And there again, you can just catch a little glimpse of that Tiffany pattern right there. And again, that Tiffany pattern that has been degraded is going to be replaced with this one that I prepared specifically once I get it cut out completely. Again, I've got to work around all of these intricate edges, all of those little flower patterns that you can kind of see in the shot right there. They all have to be cut out using those surgical scissors. It's a time-consuming, tedious process. And if you get anxious and you try to rush it, it's so easy to slip with the scissors and to cut into the decal. And once that decal is put on the machine and I clear coat it, any cuts through this gold leaf pattern are going to, at least to my eyes, will stand out like a sore thumb. So I've got to be incredibly patient. Instead of having 3 cups of coffee that day, I only had 2 today, knowing that I was going to be working on cutting this out. And I'm joking about that, but I'm just saying even caffeine can get you a little bit edgy, and you got to stay cool as a cucumber when you're trying to work around these edges so you don't cut into that gold leaf. So, but that's why not everybody does this type of restorative work. My good friend Alex Askarov from England says he told me uh, privately, and he told me also publicly in an exchange that we had. He said, I buy my machines pretty because there's only a select number of people that are willing to take on projects like this, and it really is true. There's not many of us left that do restores to this level. Preservation is one thing, shining a machine up is another. Even doing the clear coating type work to enhance the look of existing decals and original paint, that's a tedious process. But this is a process that you really have to enjoy doing it to make it worthwhile. No matter what you charge, you got to make it uh, somehow fun and and just work through it step by step, not try to take it all in at one time. Here we got rust all the way down, rust in here. This is all pitted rust in there as well. That is what the serial plate looked like, if you're able to see that on this live stream at all. It was just totally encrusted, combination of just buildup and junk, and also rust as well. And the problem when you're cleaning up a serial plate like this is all of the lettering going down is inlaid with a special enamel paint at the factory. There's a machine, you'll see it. If you've never watched the video on the landing page of this channel, where I take you on a tour of the Kilbowie, Scotland plant, and you'll actually see the machine that does this stamping. It's got like about 8 to 10 little arms that kind of come down rapid succession, almost like the old-fashioned typewriters. And it snaps into that plate, and it actually engraves it going all the way down. And then there's a special process to inlay all of those numbers and the lettering as well. If it's a post 1899 machine, then it's also going to have a letter, usually a G series letter at the front of it. If it's pre 1900, then it's only going to have numbers. That's the way you can tell right away how old an early singer is. If you see a letter in front of that serial number, you know it's at least 1900 or older. If you don't see a number, then you know it's pre 1900. It could be 1850s, 1860s, 70s, 80s, or even all the way up to 1899, if that helps at all. Kind of looking at the bottom of the machine now. This is the carriage area to the far left side of the machine. Whenever you're working with the vibrating shuttle system, you're dealing with a carriage that long shuttle has to fit into. And trying to time a machine with the carriage system is a little bit trickier because there's several set points on this carriage assembly that have to be adjusted as far as the alignment and the swing, because as this is moving back and forth, look at the contour of this right here. This has to follow that contour, and it follows it. You know, they talk about when you are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, with like a space shuttle or something like that, there's this tiny little envelope clearance that they have to go through. And if they miss it by just a little bit, they can bounce off of it and end up bouncing back out into space. I'm sure all of you have heard of that before. The clearance of this carriage in relation to the contour of that, the contour of the machine right there is just wafer paper thin. And so you've got to get the carriage aligned just right so that it's not going to make contact with that, and it's going to time the machine properly. It's just very tedious. I'll just leave it at that. And again, I don't know how clearly you can see it with this webcam, but there's a lot of rust buildup on the bottom of this machine as well. Oh, hi, Kevin and Doreen. Kevin and Doreen have joined along with Mindy and others, and Emma. Just more, all of this has to be cleaned off. Again, it's not patina, it's filth. And in some cases it's rust. So that all has to be cleaned off of the machine. You can see it as well across all of the mechanics on the bottom. And I think that's our opening shot. I think we've gone full circle. Pretty sure we have. Nope, we haven't. Now I've actually taken this Model 27 and I've taken it outside of the workshop, because what I'm having to do now is use a very special brass soft brush in order to remove all of the old lacquer, the old paint. I'm also going to be removing all of the decals because this is so far gone. If I rough it up and I try to repaint it over that, there's going to be uneven surfaces. So I've got to take it all the way down to bare metal. Not all machine restores require this, but this one did. And here I'm removing the long plates. And again, I've got to take off all of this hardware off of the machine in order to get it down to bare metal so I can clean it up. There, I'm just kind of showing you that as the pieces come off, I'm setting them over here, and then I bag them up individually. You may have seen that at the beginning of the live stream. All the pieces get bagged up individually so that I don't lose any of the parts. And some of these pieces have not been taken off ever. So loosening some of them up, I have to use the torch sometimes, and I've got to use other solvents to try to loosen up screws. Because again, as screws are on the machine, again, this machine is from 1908. It's over 100 years old. As you try to remove screws, they're oftentimes they're going to be fused, and the threads have basically uh, locked in. You're not able to get them out. And if you try to force it, you can crack a screw off very easily. So I try to be very patient and very intentional about getting all of the hardware pieces off of the machine. They were obviously looking at the presser foot bar, and you can just again look at why I'm taking it down to bare metal. It's there's more rust and degradation of the surface than there is paint left. I think this is the coolest on these Model 27s, and some of the other early 1900 Singers have them as well. I love this little round feed dog and throat plate cover. It's super cool, as opposed to the more typical ones you'll see on the Singer models after 1900s. You see it probably hasn't gotten much maintenance either. You can look into that area and see it just packed out with all kinds of sewing projects over the years, over the decades. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but that's a close-up shot of the bobbin winding assembly. The filth and the buildup on that is, I mean, it's got to be 1 to 2 millimeters thick. And then you look at the medallion here, you can see the mold on it right over there. You can see the rust on the end of the stitch length knob here. It's just the machine is it's needing a lot of TLC, isn't it? And there I've taken off the bobbin winding assembly, and you can see it's more rust than it is metal. And some of that is varnishing and veneer buildup, but it's a lot of rust as well. And because this mechanism has to be able to turn, and this, like a pendulum, has to go back and forth, there's a lot of maintenance that has to be done to this particular unit as well. And that requires some disassembly beyond what you already see. And there again, as I'm taking the parts off, I'm kind of staging them over by my drill box. And that, I believe, is the beginning, because this kind of opened up with that faceplate. Yep. They were kind of looking inside of the faceplate. And again, all of that stuff has to be cleaned up. And there are some adjustments and some servicing. Yucky faceplate, right? That is not a piece of jewelry right now you want to be wearing out. That's for sure. I thought we had come full circle, but I don't remember this one. Maybe my memory's slipping, but here I'm actually taking the upper tension apart because there's so much rust that's in that each one of those parts as well that has to be restored properly. Yeah, now we've made it full circle finally. So this is part of the upper tension you're looking at right here. All individual pieces that have to be restored. Some of them will have pitting in them, and because in some of these areas, the thread is going to be passing through. I've got to use a combination of processes to try to get that metal surface restored so that there aren't any tiny little snags or gripping points in there that are going to grab that thread and cause it to snag and break. And there I am with my little goggles on. Safety first, right? Safety first. Doesn't that look nasty? That again is going to be the unit that is going to control what kind of lock stitch we get. Rest assured, we weren't getting any lock stitch in its current condition. More parts that I'm kind of staging over there. And now I'm trying to begin the process of getting the surface prepped to go to the paint shop. That requires taking it all the way down to bare metal. Again, what I use is a special brush. You can pick these up at most hardware stores, um, and they're made on a combination of brass and copper leads. And what that gives you is it gives you the ability to strip off the paint and the decals so you can build that surface back up, but it does not scratch. It doesn't scratch the metal. You can even go over chromed portions with this as long as you don't apply a lot of pressure. And it does a beautiful job of restoring the luster, even to chrome. And chrome again is, I mean, it's an incredibly thin coated surface that goes on the parts. So you got to be real careful you don't burn through it, even with a brush like this. You see there, we're starting to get the bare metal starting to show through here. Kind of looking down at the machine here with the arm. See, we're starting to make a dent. And if you're curious, from the time of starting this, if you include taking off all of the parts, it takes a good solid 3 hours. 3 hours if everything goes well to get the machine all the way stripped down so it's ready to go to the paint shop. And then you spend another 45 minutes to an hour masking off all of these orifice openings so that when I do the surface work on it with fresh commercial grade paint, you don't get any of that on the inside parts of the machine, because paint and then eventually clear coat is going to create the same gummy problem that the veneering and the varnishing causes, that you take off in the beginning. Kind of working around the feed dog area here, you can see we're starting to get down close to bare metal, but not quite yet. More work around there. And again, when you're working with a drill like that, even though it's not a Dremel high-speed drill, when you're navigating around these parts in the carriage area, you got to be real careful because those can be bent with the strike of that brush hitting it. So as you're working around those areas, I take it very, very slow so I don't damage the machine and end up creating more work. Making a lot of progress up there. Lovely, lovely decals. And once they're finished, this one here that you're looking at on screen right now is going to be replaced by some of these are real similar, so I got to make sure I'm showing you the correct one. All right, I'm digging through my pile over here. This is not the one I wanted to show you, but it's going to be replaced by something similar to this. And again, if you can't see it on the webcam, this is all gold leaf work that I did. And now I have to go through with those surgical scissors and cut around all of these contours around all of these edges, all the way around. Oh. If you have a cat, you'll probably appreciate this more. Again, if you're joining the live stream a little bit late, what I've started to do to make it more interesting is people are going through all of the photos that I post to show the progress, I've started inserting random pictures. And here the cat is apparently claiming that the dog chases it because it's jealous that it can poop in the house. I don't know if that's true or not. Probably not. Probably not. More stripping of the paint and the decals. There's that plate that goes on the rear part of the jewelry. It's not looking much like jewelry right now, is it? You can get a real clear shot. This is the brass style brush, and then I've got other soft wire brushes. These are a lot softer than the average wire brush, and I'm able to use these as well. And I use some of these also to clean up that medallion on the front that had mold on it to return that luster to it. This one I wouldn't want to use because it's not gonna be able to follow those contours. It's a little bit more rigid. These are a little bit softer, so they kind of go into those crevices. I've actually torn a hole in my glove working with that. Here across the arm, you can see we're real close to getting to that finish point, so it can go back to the workshop. And once we get the machine completely, for lack of a better description, once we get the machine completely naked, it will give you a glimpse of how the machine would have looked at the factory, how the machine would have looked at the factory before it was finished and painted back in 1908 when this machine originally came out of the factory. So I think that's kind of fun to see the machine in its naked state as well. And I've had a couple people that said to me, you ought to take a machine all the way down to bare metal, kind of a silver bullet look, and then clear coat it like that and just leave it as a silver bullet. I'm probably going to try that someday once I get caught up. If I ever get caught up, that would be kind of cool. There's one of those real soft wire brushes that I use for some of the other areas, like the carriage area and other parts where I don't want to have that big, bulky uh, brass type brush striking something and maybe damaging it. You see the scope of brushes here, different types of brass brushing, soft wire brushing. There's a series of different brushes that I use depending on where I'm at on the machine and what I'm looking to accomplish. Back of the pillar again. I'm going to look at some of the questions real quick here. Oh, hey, Doreen. I have a 27 like, this is Mindy's question or comment. I have a 27 like the one you're showing. The previous owner painted it black and added a motor. It sews beautifully, and I prefer to treadle it. And that's how this machine is going to be used, Mindy, as well. This is going to be set up as a treadle down in Texas. And so there's no motor that's going to go on this either, which is kind of cool because on the 27s, you've got these beautiful Tiffany decals on the back of here that if you put a motor on there, it's going to cover them up. So it's kind of nice to be able to see those decals as you walk around the machine or, as you're looking at the back of the machine for whatever reason, maybe to service it back here. So I think it's great that it's being set up as a treadle. And I don't know if on yours, Mindy, if they painted it black, did they replace the decals on your Model 27 with the Tiffany gingerbread pattern, or is it just a solid black Model 27? Oh, nice. Mindy's husband does restore work like this gentleman down in Texas that I partnered with. The guy down in Texas again is doing the cabinet. I'm doing the machine, and then I'll be shipping the machine back to him so he can install it in the cabinet and then present it to his customer. So all of the hours to finish this project from start to finish, Doreen, if I were to roughly, and I'm not even done yet, so I'm kind of spitballing a little bit here. It's going to be probably about a close to a from start to finish, probably on this project about 150 hours. 150 hours to get it from beginning to end. It might be a little bit higher than that depending on what else I encounter. Probably let's just say between 150 to 200 hours to get this project fully done before I'm. And then I why don't we say 153 hours, because it'll take me probably about 3 hours to pack it up as well. So yeah, about 100, right around 150 to 200 hours, somewhere in that ballpark to get it done. Oh, Doreen likes the surprise picks that I've been sliding in there. I think they're kind of fun, isn't it? You're looking at all these machine shots, and all of a sudden you have something just totally random pop up. It's kind of cool. So here you can see we are really much down to the metal here. And then what I'll do once I get it all the way down to bare metal on the entire machine is I'll go over it with that brass brush last to make sure that if there are any tiny little scratches that could show through, that brass brush will take those out very nicely. They were starting to focus on the back of the pillar area, also on that beautiful balance wheel. I'm not sure if Mindy's Model 27 has exactly the same style, oversized spoked wheel, but it really is a breathtaking balance wheel. It's really spectacular. You can see my gloves have not stood up very well. If I'm in surgery, I've totally compromised the patient. But I've got to keep swapping out gloves as they end up getting eaten up either by me getting too close with the drill or going over other surfaces of the machine that are a little bit rough. They don't stand up very well, do they? And look at all this rust again. Hopefully you can see that on the webcam. There was so much rust on this Model 27. I don't know how Mindy acquired her Model 27, but um, hopefully hers wasn't as bad off as this one. Mindy said Mindy, are you saying that you have the original decals, the Tiffany gingerbread decals on your Model 27, or are you saying that it's a solid black machine? I wasn't sure based on what you typed. I'm sorry. So yeah, the rust is pervasive on this. There you're kind of looking at the scope. You can kind of see the balance wheel. You can see all the parts kind of lining up there. And then again, what I do is I bag them all up, and you can see that on the other workbench. And then I'll have to restore each one of those parts individually. And there I'm working with some of the soft wire brushes as well, changing them out as I go through different phases of prepping the machine. Really, really close right there. Look at the beautiful metal that these machines were manufactured of. Just spectacular. Now we're trying to work very carefully around. You can see the badge mark right here, the medallion. Um, and the good thing about these medallions is you can work with them very carefully in trying to clean them up with a proper type of wire brush. Unlike if you're working with a centennial badge mark, as one of my good friends discovered, centennial badge marks, you want to be really, really, really careful with them because they are a multi-stage badge mark that has a resin colored buildup on it. And if you try to use a brush or something like that on a centennial badge mark, you're going to end up destroying it. And that's what my friend from, I think he's from Kentucky, he ended up discovering that in a bad way. So choose your tools carefully. If you decide to try to restore a machine yourself, it's not just any random wire brush. There are different types of wire brushes. They're made out of different types of metals, and you got to choose them very carefully so you don't have more work on your hands in destroying a part of the machine that you were hoping to restore. working on the front of the pillar. Like I said, I went through several gloves. Oh, okay. I'm reading Mindy's comment now. She says that the decals were painted over, which is a horrible shame. Again, like I've shown you a couple of times, um, the Tiffany or the gingerbread decal set is just utterly spectacular. And while I make my own because I want to get them as close to the original specs as possible, you can buy these aftermarket too. You can buy these patterns aftermarket, and so Mindy could always decide to add decals to her Model 27 again. And depending on the year of the Model 27, in all likelihood, it came with the same pattern that I'm putting on this machine once I get done with the rest of the work at the workshop or at the workshop and then also down at the paint shop as well. So you just have to be careful if you're going to be putting decals on a painted surface. What kind of paint was used? Was it acrylic? Was it a enamel? Was it a an older style? There's so many different types of paints, and that determines how you have to prepare that paint so you can put the decals. And then obviously after you do that, you have to mask the machine off, and then you have to clear coat that entire machine. The clear coating is what protects those beautiful decals once they're put on the machine. If you don't clear coat this, the decals will not last at all. They're going to get destroyed very quickly. Now you can look at that badge mark even with this webcam not giving perfect clarity. And you can see straight away the impact that I've been able to bring in restoring the beauty of that badge mark. That badge mark is such a central part of the machine. It's got to have that wow factor to it. You know what I mean? Along with this stitch length controller, I've also started to get that restored back as well, because that's a central focus of the machine. When people are looking at that class 27, they look at this, they look at that, they look at all the decal work that's going to be put on the machine, and that's the jewelry, right? That's the beauty of the machine. But again, restoring something like this is very, very tricky. If you decide to tackle it, uh, choose your materials and choose your approach very, very carefully. There you have even a clearer picture. There's still a little bit more work to done in here. And this is a raised surface, so you have to kind of work around those contours a little bit. Nothing overly abrasive because this is just paper thin. It's a paper thin stamped type medallion that goes onto the machine. It's paper thin. So you have to be real, real careful. Bottom of the machine, starting to do some cleanup there. I'll just kind of move the camera a little bit. You can look at all of the buildup on there. That all has to be removed because these are all moving parts adjacent to the carriage that moves that vibrating shuttle. And any of this stuff is going to restrict movement and it could affect the sewing as well. So, this is another part of the project that takes quite a bit of time to get that stuff cleaned up. Look at how that's looking now. You can kind of see that, I think, in the shot. Compared to that. You can see how far we have to go, right? Starting to make a dent in up there. And there is, other than right on the inside of the pillar, I have to do a little bit more work there. There is what a naked machine looks like it would have back at the factory in 1908 before they obviously did all the paint work, applied the decals, and then applied all the hardware back to it as well. So it kind of just gives you an idea of what the machine underneath its skin, in a sense, looks like. And even from this angle, you can look at that medallion and just see how that little piece of jewelry has begun to come to life again. Also, I've gone after the serial plate as well over there, and it's starting to look like a machine that could become a phoenix, right? It's starting to look like a machine that could become a phoenix. Across the arm there, nice bare metal to work with. The reason that if it's pitted in that you want to get it down to bare metal like this is when you lay down that paint, nothing's going to show through. You're not going to get any uneven surfaces. It's going to be a beautiful, gorgeous museum looking type finish. The rear of the machine here, back of the pillar, you can see all of that has been cleaned up as well. A little bit more certain sections to do. Looks a little bit different, doesn't it? And that's not even done yet. There's more work that has to be done on that. There's that plate that goes on the rear of the machine, still very encrusted and rusted very badly. Faceplate, showing you all the individual hardware pieces that have to be restored individually. And that's what adds a lot of time to the project. And there I've gotten the machine back in, I've blown it off, I've wiped it down. If you ever decide to take a machine of yours and take it down to bare metal, just realize you got to do a lot to that surface to get all of those microscopic little remnants of the paint and decals and dust and everything else off of that paint surface before you go to repaint it. That surface has to be absolutely clean before you lay paint down on top of it, whether you're painting it yourself or having someone else that's skilled to do it paint it for you. And again, the masking process is so essential, masking off any open spaces, including the bottom of the machine as well, so that none of that paint gets into those working mechanics and creates, a binding on the machine. You'll get done with it, the machine will look great, but then you'll try to turn the main shaft and the balance wheel, and it'll be like it's all gummed up again. That's because either the paint or the clear coat has worked its way into any of those little openings that you've missed, and can totally destroy the mechanics of the machine. So, just it's a very, like I said, I think it was Doreen that said how many hours. Around 200 hours is approximately how much time I'll spend by the time we finally get done with this. Probably a little bit more. Back of the machine. And I think that's full circle. Yep, that's full circle. There's that goofy guy again. So I hope you can, I wanted to show this to you just because all of these things had to happen before I got to the stage today where now I'm working to, uh, get all of the decals cut out properly so that trying to get all those decals cut out now so I can properly finish the process. We're getting really close, but we've got, a good amount of time yet to go. So that's what I'm going to focus on next, is ending this live stream and then sitting down to these decals one by one. And between the surgical scissors that I showed you, the X-Acto knives, and then also this diamond bit cutter, working around all the edges of these decals, getting them cut out as close as I can without cutting the gold leaf, and then getting down to my paint shop in the next couple of days, getting them onto the machine, applying that clear coat, and then being able to present that Model 27 to you when it's completely done. That's the cool stuff. But these pieces I still have to work on. I haven't even gotten to these yet. So I've got to restore this, because leaving it like that with brand new paint and decals, I don't think the customer down in Texas that I'll never meet would be very happy. This one I've done a little bit of cleanup on, but you can still see there's a lot more work to do on that as well. Oh, Doreen is asking about the painting. I lease space in a shop that's shared by another gentleman that does motorcycle restores and some car restores, and I use my own paint, my own painting tools and everything like that. So I do the paint work start to finish. Every aspect of the restore is done by me. So yeah, all these individual parts over here have to be restored and cleaned. But the first thing I'm going to do, I like to do it when I'm earlier and fresher. I like to do the cutting because there's a lot more opportunity when I get tired in the, at the latter part of the day to make a mistake in cutting these out, which I don't want to do. So, well, there you go. A little bit of a glimpse, kind of what I'm working on today. And keep watch. Hopefully in the next week or so, why don't we just say week to 2 weeks, I'll be able to finally get this machine completely done. And using my finger or using my hand, we'll crank off some stitches on it before I ship it back to Texas. I don't see any other questions. If I missed any other questions, I apologize. But thanks for kind of jumping on this this live stream. I'm going to sit down now and get going on these decals. And then once I get these done and it sealed in a bag so that nothing gets picked up on them, I'm going to then move on to all these parts and get all these parts cleaned up so I can get them back on the machine once I get done with my work down at the paint shop. So that's it. Yep. Start to finish, Doreen. And you know what? I'd love to say it is dedication, but it's also because I'm just so doggone picky. I think if I used another party to do paint work, or if I used another party to do any of the other phases of the restore, I would drive that individual, or I would drive those individuals absolutely bonkers, because my standards are just way, way above what some people would consider to be reasonable. But, if a customer is going to invest a lot of money to do a piece like this, that's going to stand for generations, with their family as an heirloom, it's got to be done right, or I shouldn't be doing this kind of work. It's got to be done as close to perfection as possible. You know what I mean? It's got to be done that way. There's no other way to look at it. So, all right, y'all take care. And I'm going to click off now. Thanks for joining, everybody. And you have a great rest of the week. Take care. Bye.